Welcome to Bookworm Dash, the home where stories from the pens of South African writers come to life. Here, you'll discover captivating Afrikaans novels, Afrikaans short stories, and English tales to enjoy while doing your daily chores or simply relaxing. Thank you for visiting us. Please give us a like and subscribe so we can continue sharing more stories and help our channel grow. We welcome your comments, positive or negative, as every bit of feedback helps us improve. All copyrights belong to the respective writers. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 20. Paul placed the ribbon and trophy into the showcase, his hand lingering a moment longer on the cool metal. "This is for you, Stella," he whispered. He sighed heavily, his heart burdened, and turned toward the door. "Alpha?" "Yes, Joseph?" "We're at the pack offices. Could you come as soon as possible? I'm on my way." Cutting the mind link, Paul grabbed his car keys. At the door, he paused, looking back at the trophy. "Babes, we miss you." Arthur howled within him, the sound aching. He wanted to see Elder Anna, but Joseph wouldn't call if it wasn't urgent. And if there was one thing Paul had learned, it was to never ignore the little signs. Joseph was already waiting at the entrance. "Alpha," Joseph said, bowing his head respectfully. "Delta," Paul replied, frowning. "What's the matter?" "Better if I show you, Alpha." Paul followed him down to the basement. A thick, metallic scent hit his nose. Blood, death, and pup. Paul shoved past Joseph. His boots echoed heavily down the hallway. At the doorway, he stopped cold. Two broken, maimed bodies lay on a table, rich and... "Rihanna," he breathed, anguish cracking his voice. A guttural growl escaped his chest, furious and heartbroken. All of Moonvalley went still, sensing his rage through the earth itself. They waited. The second growl would call them to the arena. Paul walked closer. His claws slid out. His emerald green eyes burned with grief. "Where the hell is Beta Charlie?" Joseph motioned a warrior to fetch him immediately. Paul shouted into the mind link, "Charlie, get here now!" Moments later, Charlie burst into the room, fell to his knees the instant he saw the bodies. "I'm sorry, Alpha. Please forgive me." Paul's voice was cold as stone. "You were supposed to protect them. Where was his backup?" He didn't have one, Alpha," Charlie stammered. Paul stepped closer, rage trembling through his limbs. Joseph and the others pressed themselves flat against the walls, not daring to move. Gamma Stephen arrived, took one look, and lowered his gaze. Paul's voice cracked like a whip. "You failed. You're removed as Beta effective immediately. You have 1 week to settle your affairs. Then, 1 month in the pit." Stephen moved in to escort Charlie out, while Paul turned to the warriors. "Prepare them for a warrior's burial. They deserve that honor." At his office, Paul sat opposite Joseph, his hands clenched into fists. "Where did you find them?" "Hanging from a tree at Dr. Johnson's mansion, Alpha. Gray Claws were watching us, laughing." Paul's eyes glowed deadly. Long silence. "Delta Joseph, call a pack meeting." Joseph went out and howled twice, a rare and ancient call. Pack members began gathering immediately. The arena filled quickly. Crystal arrived, taking her place beside her son. She touched his arm. His jaw unclenched slightly at her touch. Elder Anna entered alone. No Rebecca. Strange. Paul rose to his feet, hand lifted. Silence. He addressed them. "Moonvalley mains, hear me. The gray claws have broken the peace. They have declared war. They targeted our humans, our warriors, and they murdered 2 of our own, Warrior Rich and Pup Rihanna, who died a warrior's death." Growls rippled through the pack, wolves half-shifting in fury. Paul's alpha growl rolled through the arena, commanding control. "No one is to leave our borders without permission. Security will double. Be vigilant. They pretend this is about the pups. It's not." He paused, letting the pack absorb his words. "Also, Beta Charlie failed you. He is stripped of his title and will serve a month in the pit before rejoining us. Not as Beta." The pack bowed their heads for the fallen. "Lastly," he cleared his throat, feeling his heart pound, "I have found my true mate." Murmurs broke out. "It is Stella. She will be our Luna. She knows our ways. She was raised among wolves." The pack listened, stunned but respectful. "She is missing. I ask for your help. Keep your ears open. Bring our Luna home." He nodded once, his face solemn, and stepped down to approach Elder Anna. Chapter 21. By the time Paul caught up to Elder Anna, she stood waiting by her cottage door. "Elder Anna," he greeted. "Alpha Paul." They bowed respectfully. "How can I help you, pup?" Paul stepped closer, but she didn't invite him in like usual. Strange. He sniffed the air once, twice. There was something familiar. He frowned and pushed past them, heart racing. Inside, standing at the stove, was Stella. His heart stopped. Frozen in place, spoon in midair, Stella heard his gasp. Arthur surged forward inside him. "Mate!" "Stella?" Paul whispered. She turned. Wide, terrified eyes met his. He rushed to her. She screamed and struggled as he grabbed her. Paul froze, stunned, as she pulled away, crying, and fled into the bedroom. Anna and Rebecca rushed inside, blocking him from following. Paul's chest heaved. His hands shook. A tear slid down his cheek as Arthur howled inside. Outside, Anna and Rebecca tried to calm him. "What the hell happened?" he snarled. "Gray claws," Rebecca said grimly. The fury exploded out of Paul. He shifted, Arthur roaring to the sky. His growl rattled the earth. Anna and Rebecca shifted too, blocking him. "Stand aside!" Arthur snarled. "No! Calm down first!" Liza snapped back. Slowly, painfully, Arthur ceded control. Paul collapsed to the ground, breathing raggedly. Rebecca brought tea, thick with valerian and monkshood, and Paul drank it down without question. Then they told him, piece by agonizing piece, the story of what happened to Stella unfolded. Paul's claws cut into his palms as he struggled not to break. When it was done, Paul lowered his head. "Goddess, bless Rich and Rihanna. Let them find peace." Anna placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Pup, give her time. We will heal her." He nodded, grief etched into every line of his body. Turning, he found 50 warriors waiting silently in the woods. They had heard enough. Each bowed to him, loyalty and fury burning in their eyes. Paul shifted without a word and led them back into the village. Tonight, he would let Stella heal, but vengeance would come. Chapter 22. Crystal knocked softly at Paul's door. No answer. She exchanged a worried glance with Tashia at the kitchen table. Moments later, Paul's door swung open. Without a word, he strode past them, grabbing his bag and heading for the front door. Outside the village, Arthur shifted into his wolf form, carrying the backpack carefully between his teeth. They stopped just at the edge of the elders' forest cottages. Arthur's emerald eyes fixated on the cottage where Stella was. He stood motionless, his heart heavy with longing. Inside, Stella pressed her hand against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I miss you too," she whispered into the glass. Anna watched her sadly, then walked toward Paul, who sat waiting near the trees. Paul didn't speak at first, the weight in his chest too much. Anna placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "How is she, Grandma?" he finally asked, voice rough. "She's healing, pup, physically at least, but emotionally, it's harder. She still refuses to see anyone, especially men." Paul clenched his fists, but nodded. His gaze drifted again to the small cottage. "I know I have to be patient, but every part of me just wants to hold her." Anna gave a soft smile. "And she knows that, Paul. Give her time." They sat in silence until Paul broke it again, voice lower. "Grandma, the rogue stone, was it real?" Anna's face paled instantly. Paul sat forward, alarmed. "Grandma, what aren't you telling me?" Rebecca appeared, equally shaken. "Alpha, if they have that stone and a witch, they can teleport, attack unseen, anywhere." Paul's blood ran cold. "And with Stella's blood?" Anna continued, her voice trembling. "They could create the wand needed for ultimate destruction." Paul growled low in his throat. Arthur howled inside him. "We need to move fast," Paul said grimly. He shifted into Arthur and raced toward the village, urgency pounding through him. In the village, Crystal, Stephen, and Joseph were already waiting. Paul explained everything: the rogue stone, the wand, the danger, in clipped, furious sentences. No one argued. They all understood. This wasn't just about Stella anymore. It was about the survival of Moonvalley itself. Chapter 23. Paul sat at the little coffee shop across from Stella's old apartment, nursing a black coffee. He thought about her, the warmth of her laugh, the softness of her skin. Arthur whimpered inside him. "God, I miss you, babe." He almost didn't hear Beta Vaughn slide into the chair opposite him. "Alpha," Vaughn greeted. "Beta," Paul rasped, clearing his throat. They spoke in low voices, careful not to draw attention. Paul told him about Rich, about Rihanna, about Stella. Beta Vaughn's fists clenched tight, his yellow wolf eyes flashing with barely controlled rage. "She's safe now," Paul added. "But broken." "And the rogues?" Beta Vaughn asked. Paul nodded grimly. "They're moving fast. We have to get you, Leo, and your families out." Vaughn agreed immediately, loyalty shining in his eyes. They made plans: a fake dinner, a trip to the theater, a discreet escape. Before Vaughn left, Paul made one more offer: to nominate you as Moonvalley's next beta. The shock and honor on Vaughn's face said it all. "I'd be proud to serve," Vaughn said, bowing his head. Meanwhile, Crystal and Tashia were visiting the elders. Stella ran into Tashia's arms the moment she saw her, tears flowing freely. Crystal's heart ached to see it. At the kitchen table, black stones lay scattered, protection stones. "We're preparing for the roguestone attack," Anna explained. "Tourmaline, obsidian, jade, smithsonite. They'll weaken the wand's effects." Crystal and Tasha eagerly joined the work, weaving stones into little mesh bags to hide around Moonvalley. That night, as Crystal walked home, she laughed softly. She looked down at her dust-covered clothes. Maybe hope wasn't lost after all. Maybe, just maybe, they would survive this. And somewhere, deep in the dark, Arthur sat vigil beneath Stella's window, watching, waiting, protecting, as he always would. Chapter 24. The women of the Moonvalley Mains were decorating the village with wildflowers. The pups ran around with colorful ribbons, hanging them everywhere they could reach. Tables were scattered throughout the arena, laden with food, constantly replenished as the day went on. 2 large stacks of wood stood proudly in the center, adorned with monkshood flowers. Gifts had been placed at the entrance of the arena, everything from jewelry to baskets of fresh food. By sunset, the village had fallen into a heavy, expectant silence. At dusk, pack members began filling the arena. From the youngest pup to the eldest elder, everyone was there, except for the warriors guarding the borders. You could hear a pin drop. Atop the stacked wood lay the bodies of Rihanna and Rich, prepared for their final farewell. Alpha Paul stepped forward, a lump rising painfully in his throat. How could he ever honor Rich and Rihanna enough? They had brought his mate back to him. "Tonight, we gather under the gaze of the moon goddess to honor Rich and Rihanna," Paul began, voice thick with emotion. "We ask the goddess to receive them into her arms. Rich was a warrior with a heart bigger than any battlefield. He would have laid down his life for anyone, wolf or human alike." He bowed his head, wiping a tear away before continuing. "He did lay down his life. His presence among us was a blessing. His life, though short, was filled with service, laughter, and loyalty. He gave everything to protect Rihanna and save our future Luna." Paul paused to collect himself. His voice grew stronger. "Rihanna, a brave 12-year-old half-blood pup raised by Omega Aiden. Though she couldn't shift yet, she fought with the spirit of a true warrior. Her sacrifice will never be forgotten." Stepping closer to the pyres, Paul bowed deeply. Delta Joseph approached with 2 torches, handing one to Tasha and one to Rich's mother, Caroline. Paul lit both torches, his head bowed low in respect. On this day, his alpha rank bowed beneath the honor of the fallen. Together, the women set the stacks ablaze. As they circled the flames, the entire pack shifted in unison. Their haunting howls filled the night, joined by echoes from the border warriors. Then, in solemn unity, they filed past the burning pyres and exited the arena. Later, after returning to their homes to redress, the pack members gathered again in the village center. Paul raised his hand in the air. "Tonight, we celebrate the lives of Rich and Rihanna until dawn." But as the celebrations unfolded, Paul quietly slipped back to the pack house, his heart heavy. Meanwhile, at the elder's cottage, Stella heard the howls and stepped outside, her heart aching. A warrior wolf approached her gently. She knelt, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I wonder who we lost. Someone I knew, maybe?" she whispered, petting the wolf's thick fur. Inside, Anna and Rebecca found her making a sandwich. "You heard the howls," Rebecca said gently. "Who was it, elders?" Stella asked, her voice trembling. Anna sighed, taking her hand tenderly. "It was Rich and Rihanna, pup." The world tilted. Stella collapsed into Anna's arms, her body racked with sobs. Later, with a glass of port in hand, she sat silently, her mind a storm of grief and guilt. But somewhere deep within, something stirred. Not fear, but anger. And Anna smiled softly. The first step to healing had begun. Chapter 25. 26. Crystal stood at the pack house watching Beta Vaughn, his mate, and their pups climb out of the car. A wave of nostalgia swept over her, blurring her eyes for a moment. Vaughn, her first love, long before fate had intervened. "Welcome, Vaughn," she said warmly, pulling him into a brief hug. He introduced his mate and children with a respectful bow. A second car pulled up. Leo and his sister, Julia, stepped out. "Luna Crystal," Leo greeted her formally. "Leo, Julia, welcome to Moonvalley." She smiled. Julia, shy and sweet, clung close to her brother. Paul was arriving from the offices when he noticed Stephen standing outside, staring awkwardly at the door. "Stephen?" Paul asked, frowning. Stephen jerked, face turning red. I smell Grey Claws, Alpha." Paul chuckled. "Come on, let's meet our new friends." Inside, greetings were exchanged. As Paul introduced Stephen, he caught the spark that flared instantly between Stephen and Julia. "Well, well," Paul mind-linked Stephen teasingly. "Looks like you've got some convincing to do, pup." Stephen blushed furiously. After Crystal led Vaughn's family to settle in, Paul pulled Vaughn aside. "I think Stephen found his true mate." He grinned. Vaughn laughed. "Maybe we'll have a wedding before long." Turning serious, they discussed the growing unrest among the Grey Claws and the Rogue King. Vaughn shared unsettling news. Duncan had handed over the Rogue Stone, but it didn't work. "It's the blood, Alpha," Vaughn said. "Wrong blood." Paul frowned deeply. Could they have made a mistake with Stella's blood? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Together, they hatched a plan to get the good members of Grey Claws out before chaos erupted. Later that night, unable to bear the distance any longer, Paul shifted into Arthur and raced to the elder's cottage. There she was, Stella, laughing, sitting outside. Arthur's heart thundered, but when another wolf approached her playfully, Arthur saw red. He pinned the poor warrior to the ground, growling possessively. "Mine," he growled inwardly. Stella giggled, scratching Arthur behind the ears. "You're a big softy, aren't you?" she whispered. Arthur laid his head in her lap, content beyond words. Chapter 26. Arthur lay with his head resting on Stella's lap, utterly lost in bliss. Paul's heart nearly burst from joy. She liked his fur. She liked him, even if she didn't yet know it. When Anna called them in for dinner, Arthur stayed glued to her side. He lay faithfully at her feet under the table, basking in her scent now that the monkshood had faded. "Who's the wolf?" Stella asked, her voice curious and gentle. "His name's Arthur, pup." Anna smiled. "Arthur," Stella repeated softly. "Is he one of the warriors?" "No," Anna said, suppressing a mischievous grin. "He just brought a message from the pack house." Stella sighed. Shame. I feel so peaceful and safe with him. Arthur's heart soared. She feels safe with us. Later, Anna and Rebecca persuaded Stella to attend the beta election the next day. It would be her first outing. Stella hesitated, but finally agreed, if they didn't leave her alone. Arthur couldn't go with her tomorrow, they said. Stella smiled sadly and scratched behind his ears. It's okay, boy. At least I know you're keeping us safe. That night, after Stella went to bed, Arthur reluctantly padded back into the forest. He shifted, dressing quietly under the trees. His heart was pounding, full of hope and dreams he barely dared to voice. Back at the pack house, Paul tossed and turned in bed, haunted by the memory of her laughter, her hands, her kisses on his fur. Only a cold shower could calm the burning desire he felt. Soon, my mate, he promised himself. Soon. Chapter 27. The arena buzzed with excitement, a hum of anticipation thick in the air. Paul's emerald gaze swept over the crowd, searching, hoping for a flash of fiery red hair. His chest tightened painfully when he didn't see her. A lump formed in his throat. Crystal had to tap his arm twice before he even noticed. Alpha, it's time, she reminded gently. He nodded, forcing himself back into the moment, though part of him stayed lost in the crowd. Welcome, everyone, Paul said, his voice steady but distant. Our nominees for Beta are Warrior Jakes, Warrior Peter, Vaughn, Warrior Dean, and Gamma Steven. Quick reminder, no weapons, no shifting. Mate. Arthur's growl echoed in Paul's mind. And then he caught it too. Her scent, sweet and familiar. His head snapped to the left. There she was, standing next to Crystal, with Elder Anna and Rebecca at her side. Stella. Their eyes locked. Her gaze was hesitant, full of questions and lingering shadows of fear. But she was here. She had come. Paul let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and gave her a small, reassuring smile. A silent promise that she was safe. Turning back to the crowd, he lifted his hand. Good luck, men. Fight fair. Let the challenge begin. The 5 nominees entered the arena bare-chested, muscles rippling under the torchlight. Excited murmurs and giggles floated from the she-wolves in the stands. Paul tried to focus, but his heart was still tethered to Stella. Every now and then he could feel her gaze brush over him, leaving warmth like the brush of sunlight. The fights began. Warrior Jakes dove at Dean. Peter barely lasted a minute before Vaughn and Stephen tag-teamed him into submission. Stephen stood back as Vaughn tackled Jakes, pinning him fast. It was smart, tactical, but Paul barely paid attention. He was thinking of Stella. At last, only Vaughn and Stephen remained. They circled each other, 2 predators waiting to strike. Then Vaughn smiled, bowed slightly, and raised his hand in surrender. The crowd erupted into wild cheers. Paul glanced toward the elders for confirmation. Anna and Rebecca both nodded solemnly. He rose, raising his hand to quiet the crowd. Moonvalley mains, meet your new Beta, Beta Stephen. Cheers echoed like thunder. Paul made his way down, clapping Stephen firmly on the back. Now I'm never going to get rid of you, Paul teased with a warm chuckle. Stephen beamed, lowering his head respectfully. Thank you, Alpha. I'll do everything to honor the title, even if it feels like I didn't earn it. You earned it the moment you could walk, Paul said, his voice rough with affection. He turned to Vaughn. And if the elders approve, I'd like to appoint you as advisor and head of the pack office." "It would be an honor, Alpha," Vaughn said warmly. The men dispersed, laughter and celebration rising around them. Paul's eyes instinctively searched for Stella again, but she was gone. He mind-linked Crystal. "Luna, where are the elders? Where's Stella?" "They're with me. We're back at the pack house." Relief crashed over him. He took a moment in the hallway, breathing deep, pulling Stella's scent into his lungs. Then, steadying himself, he stepped into the kitchen. All the women looked up. Stella's smile faltered when she saw him. She stiffened, retreating slightly into herself, fumbling with her glass of port. Paul masked the pang in his chest with a grin. "Hello, ladies. Any chance a man could get a drink around here?" He joked lightly, pulling out a chair, the one right next to her. Stella instinctively scooted her legs away from him, but she didn't flee. Paul pretended not to notice, though inside it felt like his heart was being carved open. As the conversation flowed, he could see her relaxing little by little. Her laughter, hesitant at first, soon spilled out, soft and musical. It struck him like a lightning bolt, igniting warmth and hope deep inside. Anna teased about the moon eclipse hunt, and Crystal mentioned Stella's upcoming birthday. Stella smiled sadly, speaking of her father and a memory from when she was 6. Paul, heart aching for her, placed his arm lightly along the back of her chair. His fingers brushed her shoulder, and he felt her tense, then slowly relax. She leaned slightly toward him, trusting. His whole body burned with need to hold her, to protect her. But he kept still, just savoring her nearness. The celebration outside grew louder, but Paul barely heard it. His entire world had narrowed down to the woman sitting beside him, breathing the same air, allowing him, finally, to be near her. Chapter 28. Stella's hand never left Arthur's thick black fur as they walked quietly along the path. The evening air was cool against her skin, and the stars blinked softly overhead. Every few steps, her fingers would tighten, as if afraid to lose her anchor to safety. When Arthur paused, ears pricked and body stiff, she immediately sensed something was wrong. She glanced at Elder Anna, who had also stopped and was now watching Arthur carefully. "Elder Anna, head home and stay inside. There's trouble at the borders." "Yes, Alpha." Arthur ended the link and turned his intense emerald gaze toward Stella. For a long moment, he just stared at her, as if memorizing every detail. Her scent, her soul. Then, reluctantly, he broke away, running into the night with a silent promise to return. Stella watched him disappear into the darkness, her hand lingering midair before falling back to her side. A strange ache bloomed in her chest. She trusted that wolf, even though she didn't understand why. Meanwhile, Arthur sprinted toward the commotion at the borders. Beta Stephen arrived at the same time. Warriors had already shifted, snarling softly, ready for battle. But what stood before them wasn't an attacking force. It was a crowd of exhausted Greyclaw pack members. Men, women, pups, carrying nothing but the belongings they could save. Paul shifted back quickly, pulling on tight clothes left hidden for emergencies. His frown deepened as he approached a man who bowed low before him. "Alpha," the man said respectfully. "What are you doing here?" Paul demanded, tension coiling through his muscles. "We seek shelter," the man answered. His voice shook. "The rogue king attacked our homes. Many are dead. The rest, we fled." Paul's eyes swept over the group. He saw broken faces, fresh wounds, small pups clutching torn blankets. Grinding his teeth, he turned to Stephen. "Take them to the arena. Give them food, blankets, anything they need." Across the territory, similar scenes played out. Through the mind link, Paul coordinated with the warriors. Every group was to escort the Grey Claw refugees safely to the village. "Luna, prepare for incoming refugees. Food, beds, everything. I'll explain later." By the time Paul shifted back and sprinted toward the village, Moonvalley mains had already moved with clockwork efficiency. Tents were going up. Fires were lit. Luna Crystal and Tashia stood at the entrance, registering every soul who arrived. Paul's chest swelled with pride for his pack. This is who we are. When he reached the arena, Vaughn and Leo were already there with Sam, the de facto leader of the refugees. They headed straight to the pack office for a quick briefing. Sam explained everything. The rogues had turned on Grey Claws. Duncan's betrayal had come to light. The Rogue King believed Moonvalley and the Grey Claws were conspiring. Paul absorbed the information in grim silence until the alarm through the mind link shattered the moment. "Attack! Warriors to arms!" Paul and his leaders shifted mid-run, howls ripping into the night as they raced toward the battlefield. Across the moonlit plains, wolves collided. Grey Claws behind them, rogue wolves pouring in front of them. Blood splattered the ground. Snarls and growls ripped the air apart. And then Paul saw him. The Rogue King. Massive, scarred, brutal. They clashed with a deafening snarl, two forces of nature locked in a savage dance. Teeth snapped, claws slashed, blood sprayed the grass. Arthur gained the upper hand, sinking his canines deep into the king's throat. The king's final howl tore through the sky before he collapsed, lifeless at Arthur's feet. For a moment, all was still. And then, like a wave breaking, the rogue wolves turned and fled into the night. Victory. Paul staggered slightly, blood dripping from a gash on his leg. Dr. Chris rushed to him, inspecting the wound. "It'll leave a scar, Alpha, but you'll live." Stella. The thought slammed into him with more force than any blow from the Rogue King. "Elder Anna, is Stella safe?" "Yes, pup, she's safe." Relief nearly dropped him to his knees. "I'm fine," Paul muttered to Dr. Chris, trying to stand. Before he could move, Crystal appeared beside him, hands on her hips. "And just where do you think you're going?" she said in her fiercest mom voice. He tried to argue. He barely got 3 words out. "Not happening." Crystal cut him off. "You're sitting your ass down until you're healed." Paul sighed heavily. Not even an alpha could win against his mother. But his heart ached to be near Stella. She was probably terrified after hearing the howls and battle cries. He clenched his fists against the ache in his chest, longing burning through every inch of him. "Soon, babe, soon I'll come to you, and this time I won't leave your side." Chapter 29. Stella sat on the edge of her bed, coffee cup warming her hands, her mind replaying last night's events. Elder Anna had mentioned some of the warriors had been hurt. Her heart clenched painfully at the thought that Arthur could be one of them. She didn't fully understand her attachment to Arthur. It was just there, raw and real. She heard Anna open her bedroom door but stopped short of entering. "You've got a visitor, pup," Anna called softly. Arthur limped into the room, his movements careful. He padded over and sat beside her bed, his green eyes filled with an almost human emotion, longing, maybe, or relief. He waited patiently for her permission. Stella immediately placed her coffee down and tapped the bed beside her. Arthur didn't wait to be asked twice. He climbed onto the bed and rested his heavy head in her lap. As soon as her fingers threaded into his fur, a deep sigh rumbled through his chest. When her hand brushed over his injured leg, she gasped. "Arthur, you're hurt," she whispered, her voice trembling. A single tear slid down her cheek. Arthur gave a soft, reassuring howl and turned to lick her hand gently. Her touch, her scent, honey and lavender, wrapped around him like a cocoon. The pain in his leg seemed to ebb away under her touch. "You can just stay here with me until you're better, my hero," she whispered. Anna smiled to herself from the hallway and motioned for Rebecca to join her in the kitchen. "I think we should take a little walk and gather some saffron," Anna said slyly, leading Rebecca out the back door toward their secret meeting place. A small cave hidden among the trees. A safe place for serious conversations. Inside the cave, they sat on their familiar stone seats. Rebecca lit the small oil lamp between them. "You've remembered something, haven't you, Anna?" Rebecca asked, her voice low. "I think so," Anna said thoughtfully. "Needhamus. He had the same birthmark Stella has." Rebecca frowned. "Surely it's just coincidence, after so many centuries?" Anna shook her head. "Coincidences don't happen on a Luna eclipse night, Becca." They both sat lost in their thoughts for a long while. "We need to keep a close eye on Stella. Her birthday falls right with the eclipse," Rebecca said finally. Anna nodded gravely. "If it's true, she'll need us, and we'll need her." They agreed silently not to tell Paul or Stella until they were absolutely sure. Some truths could only bring danger. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Stella gently slid Arthur's head from her lap. His steady breathing told her he had fallen into a deep sleep. She smiled softly, slipping away to take a shower. The warm steam billowed from the cracked bathroom door. Arthur stirred at the sound of running water. His eyes caught a glimpse through the slightly open door. Stella brushing her teeth, her nightgown slipping from her shoulder, revealing creamy skin and the delicate curve of her back. Arthur froze, entranced. She turned slightly, and without thinking, Arthur stopped breathing altogether. His paws moved him toward the door before he caught himself. Shame burning in his chest, Arthur slipped out of the cottage and sprinted back toward the pack house. Inside his room, Paul shifted back into his human form. His chest heaved, not from running, but from longing. He leaned heavily against the door, closing his eyes. "Oh, goddess, please let her love me. Please let her be mine." Meanwhile, Stella saddled Irish Wind with trembling hands. She needed something familiar, something safe. As she groomed her horse, she poured out all her fears, all her heartbreaks, her whispered hopes. Unseen, Paul stood hidden, listening. The tenderness in her voice, the ache in her words. It broke him in ways nothing else could. When Stella spotted Paul approaching later, her heart leapt against her ribs. His smile was easy, natural, and devastatingly beautiful. "Hi, Stella," he said warmly. "It's good to see you here." "Hi, Paul," she answered, voice small. "Thank you for letting me visit Irish Wind." "You're always welcome," he said, meaning every word. When he invited her for a ride, she almost said yes. Almost. But fear still lurked, even if her heart ached to trust him. Instead, she agreed to see something he wanted to show her in the office. Inside, her eyes immediately found the showcase. Her breath caught. Irish Wind's name engraved on a trophy. Without thinking, she threw her arms around Paul's neck, laughing, crying at the same time. Paul caught her easily, lifting her off the ground, spinning her once like he'd dreamed 1,000 times. She fit so perfectly in his arms that it hurt. Her soft body against him, her scent, her happiness. He soaked it in greedily. Slowly, reluctantly, he set her down. He kept the conversation light, speaking animatedly about the race. He didn't dare scare her off with the depths of what he truly felt. For now, her shy smiles were enough. But inside him, the longing burned brighter than ever. Chapter 30. Stella sat quietly, looking around the table at everyone laughing and talking. Den Mother Tashia, Delta Joseph, and Luna Crystal, the three who had filled the hole left by Omega Aiden. She missed him terribly today. Her gaze moved to Elder Anna and Elder Rebecca, two women as dear to her as any grandmother. She didn't know Beta Stephen very well yet, but from what she'd seen, she knew he would feel like a little brother over time. Then her eyes landed on Paul. Paul, her first love. She had once dismissed it as infatuation, but now she wasn't so sure. Her gaze traveled slowly across his face. His unruly black curls, the dimple on his left cheek that appeared when he smiled, the perfect curve of his lips. She caught herself running her tongue over her own lips. Her eyes moved lower to the tight black t-shirt stretching across his broad shoulders, lingering at the ink peeking out on his neck. What did it mean? Why did he feel like gravity itself? Their eyes locked. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other, 1,000 unspoken questions passing between them. Paul gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. His eyes flickered briefly to her lips, and Stella quickly looked away, her heart pounding in her throat. She pushed her food around on her plate, trying to compose herself. Crystal's voice pulled her back. "Are you joining us for the introductory shifts and the hunt, Stella?" Crystal asked. Clearing her throat, Stella replied, "I'd love to, Luna, but I promised Elder Anna and Elder Rebecca I'd help them with herbs and chores." A slight frown crossed Crystal's face as she glanced at the elders. The whole table turned to look at Anna and Rebecca. Anna shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "No, Crystal, we have urgent preparations. You know the rogues still have the rogue stone." Paul studied the two women carefully. Something about the way they avoided eye contact confirmed it. They were staying back for Stella's sake. He leaned back and nodded slightly. "That's acceptable, Grandma. Next time." The moment passed, and the table grew lively again. They celebrated Stella's birthday warmly. The conversation was easy, filled with laughter, stories, and little moments that stitched them together like family. As the time came for the others to head to the arena, Stella stayed behind with the elders. Later that evening, the three of them sat outside the cottage under the red-tinged full moon. The moment of the eclipse, the umbra, was almost here. Stella rubbed her foot absent-mindedly, wincing slightly. "Is something wrong, pup?" Anna asked gently. "No, Elder Anna. My foot always burns during full moons," Stella said quietly. Anna and Rebecca exchanged a loaded glance but said nothing. Inside, they pretended to fetch more port, but they watched her carefully through the window. Then it happened. A brilliant light erupted around Stella, flooding the garden with radiance. When it faded, where Stella once stood, now stood a giant snow-white wolf, her fur like fresh snow under the full moon. Her eyes shone a piercing ice blue. Anna and Rebecca shifted instantly, bowing low to the ground before her. Celine. The name was whispered through the pack bond, without words. Celine threw back her head and howled, a long, clear song of freedom and new beginnings. Across the territory, Arthur froze mid-hunt. That scent. Mate. He took off running toward the cottage. When he arrived, he found her. The white she-wolf standing proudly under the moonlight. Their eyes locked, and the world around them disappeared. Arthur moved forward slowly. Celine met him halfway. They pressed their necks together and released a powerful, unified howl that echoed across the entire valley. Around them, the pack dropped to their knees, bowing in respect. They knew. They all knew. Their alpha had found his true mate, and she was one of them. Back at the cottage, Anna and Rebecca shifted back quickly. Paul shifted as well, standing silently in human form, watching her. Stella, no, Celine, approached him slowly, her wolf's gaze full of recognition and wonder. In a flash of white light, she shifted back into her human form. Anna rushed to cover her with a coat, but Paul got there first, wrapping her in his arms as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. My mate, he whispered into her hair, holding her tightly. Stella melted into him, all fear dissolving. Paul gently lifted her chin. Look at me, babes, he said softly. She opened her eyes, wide and vulnerable, and saw the emotion shining back at her. Their lips hovered inches apart, breathless, trembling, but Paul held himself back, not wanting to rush her. I've been waiting so long for you, he whispered. Anna's polite cough broke the moment. Regretfully, Paul pulled her onto his lap as they sat down, kneading her close. Elder Anna and Rebecca shared a smile before sitting down across from them. There's something we need to explain, pup, Anna began. Rebecca returned with drinks and poured Stella a glass of port. She drained it quickly. You're a direct descendant of Nidimus, Anna continued gently. One of the first wolves, son of Lycaon himself. Stella blinked in confusion. Nidimus? Paul tightened his hold around her waist, silently encouraging her to listen. Nidimus was the only one of Lycaon's 50 sons to survive Zeus' wrath, Anna explained. Because of a spell cast by Circe, his bloodline couldn't shift until now. Anna nodded at Stella's foot. Stella lifted it. The birthmark was gone. You broke the curse, Stella, Anna said, her voice full of reverence. You're a true blood. Stella sat stunned, absorbing the truth. And that's why I shifted tonight? Yes, Anna said. And it's why your life must stay a secret for now. If the wrong people find out. She let the warning hang in the air. Paul held Stella tighter, vowing silently that no one would ever touch her again. Anna and Rebecca excused themselves to rejoin the hunt, giving the two some privacy. For a long time, Paul and Stella sat in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, staring out at the blood-red moon. For the first time in her life, Stella wasn't afraid of what the future might bring. For the first time, she knew she belonged. She knew she belonged. Thank you for joining us for part 3 of Moonvalley's Orphan. Join us for part 4, where truths are revealed, bonds are tested, and one little girl may just be far more than she seems. Remember to give us a like and subscribe so we can continue sharing more stories and help our channel grow.